In the previous video, I explained that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his cabinet have announced that the Prime Minister is firing the head of the Shin Bet, and that the Supreme Court has told Prime Minister Netanyahu that he cannot do that. They want to block it, claiming that there's a conflict of interest. And the Attorney General, who also acts as a legal counsel to the Prime Minister's office, has also issued an injunction, issued a letter telling Prime Minister Netanyahu that he cannot interview replacements for the job. And Prime Minister Netanyahu and the cabinet have said that they plan to defy the Supreme Court and the Attorney General. In other words, they're saying that what the Supreme Court and the Attorney General have said is actually illegal. So the question is, who wins in this power struggle? The other day, there was a very important news item that dropped that gives us an important answer to this question. Have a look at this video.
אמש באמת חשפנו במהדורה המרכזית שמפכ"ל המשטרה שולח בשבוע שעבר מכתב דחוף לראש השב"כ רונן בר, בו הוא מביע בעצם חשש לחייו של ראש הממשלה בנימין נתניהו, וזאת בשל ההפגנות המתגברות סמוך למעונו בירושלים ועל רקע ההסתה הגוברת. במכתב החריף הזה טוען לוי כי בעצם קיימים פערים בולטים בהבטחת בית ראש הממשלה וסביבתו. לוי מציין שבשנה החולפת נעשו כמה וכמה פגישות בין המשטרה לשב"כ, והשב"כ התחייב להקים אמצעים טכנולוגיים, אמצעים פיזיים שבעצם ימנעו סכנה לראש הממשלה ובני משפחתו, אבל דבר לא נעשה בעניין הזה. לדבריו, לא ייתכן שבאירוע חריג במקום יקבלו קציני משטרה טלפונים על כניסת מפגינים למתחם המצומצם, אבל השב"כ לא נוקט בצעדים הנדרשים.
Before we get into the explanation, everyone make sure to go into the comments section of this video and download the free ebook No Apologies, a collection of articles of opinion pieces that I've written and have been published in various publications since the beginning of the October 7th war. Go ahead and download that ebook right now. As we laid out, Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to fire the head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar. Ronen Bar is saying, I'm not fired. Who's correct? Whose side is the law on? Again, the Prime Minister and the cabinet are saying that the Supreme Court's injunction against the firing of Ronen Bar is unlawful. Israeli law states clearly that the Prime Minister can fire the head of the Shin Bet. He doesn't even need to have cause. There needs to be a trusting relationship between them. The Supreme Court says that they have jurisdiction to block the firing of Ronen Bar. This all is coming to a head. When we think about how this is going to play out, how actually will we know who's going to win this power struggle? Well, it boils down to law enforcement. Because when Ronen Bar shows up for work on the day that he's officially terminated, according to the Prime Minister and the cabinet, he's going to claim that he was not lawfully terminated because the Supreme Court ruled that he can't be fired, and therefore he's still the head of the Shin Bet. The Prime Minister's office and the cabinet are going to say, no, you are fired. The injunction by the Supreme Court was illegal, and therefore we are defying it, and you can kindly leave the premises. You're no longer the head of the Shin Bet. So who ends up winning in this power struggle? It comes down to law enforcement, because when that day arrives, the real question in practice ends up being, will he be escorted off the premises by the police? And the question of whether or not the police will escort him off there is whether or not the police are going to honor the decision of the Supreme Court, or are they going to honor the interpretation of the law of the Prime Minister's office and the cabinet. So in this video, what you just saw is that the other day, the chief of police, Dani Levy, the chief of police in Israel, he sent a letter to Ronen Bar. In this letter, the chief of police said that he's very concerned for the life of Prime Minister Netanyahu because of insufficient security arrangements being made around the Prime Minister's residence due to a lot of these protests that are getting increasingly angry and violent in recent days. And he's worried about the Prime Minister's life. He also said in the letter that his office has reached out to the Shin Bet a number of times over the last year to talk about their cooperation and the Prime Minister's security and to talk about inefficiencies that are endangering the Prime Minister's life, that the Shin Bet has not fulfilled the obligations that it committed to, that the Shin Bet was going to beef up the security both technologically and in terms of human resources, and they have not done so, and therefore he's making this letter public. So here is the head of the police, the chief of police, calling out Ronen Bar, the head of the Shin Bet, for insufficiently protecting Prime Minister Netanyahu and essentially endangering Prime Minister Netanyahu's life. If we look at that story in the context of everything else that's going on, while we have this massive power struggle going on between the Supreme Court, the Attorney General, and Ronen Bar, and the Prime Minister and the cabinet, and the big open question is, whose side is the police going to be on? In that environment, the chief of police calling out the head of the Shin Bet for compromising the security of the prime minister sends a very powerful signal. Without saying it explicitly, the chief of police is saying that he is on Netanyahu's side, because if he really felt that the Supreme Court is correct in their interpretation, in their attempts to block Prime Minister Netanyahu from firing Ronen Bar, he certainly would not choose this exact timing to call out Ronen Bar for compromising the life of the prime minister. So here we have a very important piece of the puzzle. What it's signaling is that when push comes to shove next week, when Ronen Bar is officially fired, according to the prime minister and the cabinet, that the police will be on the side of Prime Minister Netanyahu.